Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So today on the podcast, I've got Tom Callow from My Energi, and you are the head of communications there, aren't you? So welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Liz. My pleasure.
So I've seen you many a time on LinkedIn, and we actually met in person about 8 weeks ago at Solar and Storage Live, didn't we?
That's
that
right.
was,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
really nice. Because you were comparing. Comparing,
Yes.
some of those English words.
Yeah. Sharing. There we go.
You were running a session where there was a number of other people talking about electric vehicles. But I know that you've worked within the electric vehicle industry for many years, or the automotive industry for many years, haven't you? But can you just give me a bit of background about how you got to where you are now, working at My Energi, and what is head of corporate communications? What do you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me. And my background really is, as you say, in automotive and communications, kind of mixture of both. So wanted to be a motoring journalist when I was younger, and then decided that kind of public relations and all that sort of jazz was a bit more positive and maybe less cynical sometimes. So I went into that world. Spent about 8 years in a public relations agency, consultancy in the automotive space, and then I went in-house to a big automotive services company for a couple of years to do their external communications and public relations and so on. And then, bizarrely, one of my previous clients from agency world was a company that did electric vehicle charging infrastructure. In that automotive services company, they were selling about 500,000 cars a year in the wholesale world, and they wanted charging infrastructure because they suddenly realised they were going to have to start selling and stocking electric cars. So I got in touch with him, asked him about some chargers and could we sort of buy them, and so on. Our team get in touch, which turned into one of those conversations that you don't plan. Where he offered me a job at the end of it, and I wasn't looking to move, but it was that time when electric vehicles seemed to be ramping up, and I thought it was a good idea. And that business then got acquired by BP, so I spent 4 years there, and had always, from the sidelines, sort of admired this amazing brand, this amazing company called My Energi. You know, with a great product. You know, it's always sort of annoying, really, when you see a competitor with a really good product and a really good brand. You think, so annoying. And they were so good, and just so so well regarded by the customers. So I'd always admired My Energi and got approached about a role. Funnily enough, last year, so last July 2021, and basically agreed I'd join the business in sort of late summer 2021, and for various reasons ended up joining in sort of April this year. So I've been with the business about 8 months. And in my role, sort of head of corporate communications, basically I manage our sort of public relations activity, so work with the media and also government relations activity as well. So I'm working on a lot of policy and regulatory issues, sort of day to day. Sometimes that's easy. Sometimes the government of all flavours that we've had in sort of recent decades have been pretty pro electric vehicles and energy transition. But sometimes the detail is a bit messy. So sometimes there might be a piece of regulation that is really going to sort of stifle the market, which we have to kind of raise a red flag about and say, look, have you really thought this through? So it's a really fascinating role. Get to work with a lot of external sort of stakeholders, whether that's sort of journalists, government officials, ministers, MPs, etc. And obviously try and translate what they're doing into the internal world of the business as well. But My Energi, fantastic business to work for, and as I say, it's a company I've admired for years now. And
it started off, didn't it? Is it only about a few years old now? So didn't it start off with something like kind of 20 people? Am I right? I don't know. It's gone from small.
Well, it started with two. It started with two people, which was just Lee Sutton, who's our CEO and co-founder, and Jordan Brompton, who's our CMO and co-founder. And Lee and Jordan had been friends for some time, doing different things, and basically Lee had an electric car, I think at that point I'm right in saying, and he wanted to figure out how to maximise his sort of solar generation. So he wanted to create a device that would basically maximise the amount of solar energy he could actually use in his home, so a solar diverter. And Jordan just had amazing ideas about how that could be marketed, how that could be sort of sold into the customer base. So I always describe Lee as our genius engineer and Jordan is our genius marketeer. And together that's a pretty formidable combination, because I think a lot of companies have a genius engineer and nobody to take the idea forward, or they have a genius marketeer and they end up almost sort of overhyping a product and there's nothing substantial there. So we've got the best combination of both, in my view.
Yeah.
But the solar diverter, the Eddi, was our first product. And the company was founded in 2016. The Eddi actually came out in 2017, so it took a year to really get the product right for the market.
Go on, so the Eddi is the diverter then?
The Eddi is the solar diverter, that's right. So all our products at the moment end with I. They're all Eddi or Zappi, and they there's a kind of a reference to it. So ED, I think, is energy diverter. That's why it's Eddi. And Zappi basically is sort of trading on the familiar Zap name that we seem to equate with EV charging. And then we moved forward. So Zappi came out in 2017 and was really a game changer, because it was the world's first solar dedicated EV charger. So it was the world's first solar home charger that you could use to directly put solar energy into your car and monitor it in real time effectively to see what energy was coming from the solar panels. Prior to that, people had almost been sort of guessing about how to charge their cars from solar energy. It just didn't really work, 2017, 18. 2018 was a big year for the company. So Jordan and Lee managed to get some investment from Sateri Leahy, who was the ex-Tesco CEO, and a technology investor called Bill Curry. So they got about £1.2 million of investment in 2018, which really put rocket boosters under the company, dramatically increased output, etc. And we've now sold over 400,000 devices. And that's globally as well. We're a big exporter, which we probably don't talk about enough. So that's a job I've got to do, is start talking about that more. But we're a big exporter as well. So we sell into Germany, the Netherlands, Ireland, Australia, and obviously we're looking at all the growth markets for electric vehicles and solar energy and renewable energy now as well.
The products just, so going to Solar and Storage Live was so interesting, seeing the products, and your marketing is just fantastic. I've got to say, I got a photo with one of your business development chaps kind of next to the Libbi battery, because to be honest, that one looks really, really interesting. And as I was talking to you about before we started recording, as a family, we're really interested in, we've not got solar panels at the moment and we haven't got an EV. So part of this podcast is trying to understand what's out there, what's available, and what can we do, and what can the average person do in order to kind of obtain these things. So how does Libbi work with the solar system? With all the other systems.
How does it integrate? I mean, I guess the first thing to say is, which I think is really important at this time of a cost of living crisis, is that we fully understand that our products, and we're talking about how to get the most people to do all these things, and we fully understand that our products at the moment, like anyone's in our sector, are available to a certain group of the population with the means to afford them, either finance them or buy them outright. There's a lot of people who can't afford this technology yet. So there's a big job, I think, for government and industry to work out how we make this technology more affordable, how we get it to people who can't necessarily afford to buy it themselves. So that's talking to policymakers, it's talking to landlords, talking to the house building sector, making sure we get solar panels on new build homes by default of a good spec, making sure we get landlords to start installing this as well, so that rental tenants get it, because obviously they're a transient renter that's in a property for maybe a year. They're not going to get payback from installing solar panels themselves. They need the landlord to do that for them. But if you look at the system, basically, we see electric vehicles as a real gateway into sort of renewable energy generally and domestic decarbonisation, as I call it. So what often happens, and this isn't the route everyone will take, but what often happens is someone gets an electric car as the first step, because it's out there. People are thinking about electric cars. They're kind of quite sexy, desirable products. People see them out driving, and they think, "I'll get an electric car." That makes sense. Reduce tailpipe emissions, etc.
Absolutely.
And then you start charging it at home, because the majority of homes will have access to some form of off-street parking. It's not the vast majority, but we think it is the majority. Most papers and government suggest it's about maybe 60% of homes, 65% have off-street parking. But what happens is, if you're charging at home and you buy our Zappi chargers to charge your car, what you might suddenly think is, well, this is great. I'm charging my car. I'm not doing any tailpipe emissions, but my electricity bill is going pretty high, right? So the average energy you need for a car to charge, let's say, 10,000 miles a year, or 10,000 miles a year, is roughly equivalent to the average annual electricity consumption of a UK home. So you could basically see your bill double. Now, that seems dramatic, but you've got to remember obviously that you've doubled your electricity bill, but you've zeroed your petrol and diesel bill, right?
Yes.
So actually, that's the payback, is that you might be spending more electricity, but you're certainly paying less than you would have done on petrol or diesel. But what that sometimes spurs is people think, well, hang on a minute, I'm using all this extra electricity. How can I mitigate that rise? How can I mitigate the using all extra electricity? Which then leads people to think, okay, maybe solar panels are a good idea because I can generate my own power and put that into the car instead, or generate my own energy and put that into the car instead. Once you've done that, you then look at your solar consumption, what we call the consumption figure, and there's something called self-consumption, and that is a figure of how much of your solar you're generating you're actually using. And for the average home in the UK with just solar panels, you're actually using the minority of the energy you're generating. So if you're generating energy on your roof, you're actually exporting. I mean, we call it wasting because you're getting so little money for it now. But you're basically wasting most of the energy that you're making, which sounds bizarre, right? Hence products like Eddy, our energy diverter, our solar diverter, which then pipe that solar or wire that solar to places where it can be used, say, during the day when you're out at work or something. So it might heat your hot water tank while you're out at work. It might charge your car if it's plugged in. It might heat your underfloor heating. But it will do things that can be useful for the energy it's making, but without having to kind of waste it back by sending it back to the grid.
Makes sense.
And then the Libby basically bolts onto that system by saying, right, you've still got excess solar energy that you're creating during the day. You might still have off-peak energy you're accessing during the night, and you can't use it. So let's bring in a battery. Let's bring in Libby to store that energy, and then you can use it later. So a typical kind of use case of Libby is that it's charged during the day with sunshine, it's charged during the day with solar. When most people aren't home, right? That's probably changed quite dramatically in the last few years.
Yeah,
a lot of people aren't home during the day, so you're charging your battery when it's sunny, and it's even sunny now in October. And then it's being used in the evening when you've got a peak electricity consumption. The UK domestic peak is by far and away always been the evening, and obviously it peaks in winter. So you use it in the evening, and then your battery basically ends up being depleted, or mostly depleted in the end of the night. End of the day, and then the next day it's then charged up again during the day, and then so on. So that's sort of the typical use cycle of a Libby battery, because it's basically maximising what you can use of the energy you're generating. So it's capturing what is essentially free energy at that point. So the marginal cost of that solar is zero because you've already paid for the solar panels. Obviously, you have to have paid for them first place, but the marginal cost is zero because it's free. So we believe in this idea of maximising that, what we call the self-consumption figure, because if you're generating it, you should be using it, or you should be capturing it and then using it later. The idea of exporting it back to the grid is something we really try and avoid, because although it's good to have people connected to the grid for reasons of things like flexibility, grid flexibility, it basically means that in the future, your consumption might be altered very slightly while you're asleep to help the grid, but you won't notice in the morning when you wake up. That's good, but again, sending energy back to the grid is something we try and avoid for our customers if we can.
Yeah, that sounds a brilliant idea. So what does the Libby power? So it's obviously you're getting the solar panels that are integrating with now I've got the right word. They're integrating with Libby. What does that do? Is that powering just electricity sources in the house then? So you're lighting, and if you've got electric heating or things like that.
Yeah, so the Libby effectively sits as a power supply for your home. So you can if you've got a fully charged Libby, let's say if you charge up during the day with solar, if you get home, you can run off that battery. You can run your home off the battery. So whether you're using an electric shower to have a shower, whether you're cooking on an electric hob, whether you're heating your electric heating, underfloor heating, whatever, whether you're charging your electric car, anything that uses electrical energy in your home, you can run off that. You can run off the Libby basically as whenever it's charged. We also have an option for a sort of blackout circuit as well, where if there's a blackout from the supply side, effectively you can actually power the home off a sort of a circuit from the Libby as well, because usually you'd still need some form of grid connection. You wouldn't be able to run it because basically it would cut the power to the Libby traditionally, but we have a way of usurping that, as it were, as well.
So will the diverter also work with something like, because we're looking for air source heat pumps, would the diverter also work with that and actually recognise the kind of the power that's coming in that way? Because I know that's not something that you're producing, but would the diverter manage that?
So Eddy will power any what's called sort of resistive load. So it will do it will effectively work and integrate with those sort of resistive loads. So it depends on the kind of technology you're using. And the other thing with heat pumps is that most of the time the modulation kind of, as it's called, modulation capabilities can vary. So what heat pumps tend to like is being run pretty much constantly, but they can run very low. They don't necessarily like being kind of turned off and turned on too much. So that can be something that some people don't realise about heat pumps, is that it's not like switching on and off a sort of immersion heater or something like that. They like kind of stay running to be as efficient as possible. But yeah, I mean the idea of it is that, you know, as you bring all these technologies together, they will integrate more thoroughly. One challenge for the industry is how we look towards things like interoperability. So that word is about how these technologies work with each other from different manufacturers, bluntly. So there isn't at the moment a common language, if you want to call it that, the language that all of these products speak, that they can necessarily integrate with each other.
Right. Okay.
So what happens is it's sort of a bit of a Microsoft versus Apple type scenario in a way, where you end up with technology that doesn't quite play nicely all of the time. So there are standards out there. There are some protocols, but the issue is that obviously different engineering teams implement them in different ways. Right. Everyone has their different idea of what the tolerances on the standard XYZ are, so you don't necessarily get that full interoperability of technology. And our approach to that at the moment has very much been, well, we'll build an ecosystem that we can effectively slot in. Right? So we'll build all of the things that a customer might need, the solar diverter, the charger, the battery, so that you can actually bring this system together. Because a lot of customers have had frustrations where they've put 3 different sort of third-party things together, you know, a charger, a diverter, and a battery, and they just don't really work. So there are really kind of, you know, there are quite expensive sort of home batteries out there, for example, that will, if you plug an electric car in, the battery basically is trained to see a load and then just discharge. You go, oh right, well I'm full. You've plugged something in. I will discharge my battery.
Love it. Yeah.
What actually a lot of customers want is for that control to be there, for that not to happen sometimes. So they actually want the battery to stay charged. For example, if it's middle of the night and they're getting cheap electricity, and the battery is filled with what was expensive electricity for some reason, then they might want that to stay charged and use the cheap electricity instead. So we can do that with our system. We can prioritise whether the EV charges first or the battery discharges, all that kind of stuff. So we bring a lot more intelligence to it than it's not simply a battery. And obviously Libby in itself is, you know, it's a battery, it's an inverter, and it's a controller. So you've got a solution really, a whole system, battery system. It's not simply a battery in itself.
And the innovation with all this just is mind-blowing, you know, the way the places that we're going, the way that we're able to do all these things. And that's why I want, you know, part of this podcast is to actually not just educate me, it's kind of people out there, because I'm sure, you know, there's lots of, I'm not sure whether you agree with me, there seems to be quite a lot of misinformation out there about certain technologies and the way things work or they don't work. And the press jump on these things, don't they? So it's about, for me, it's about making it more kind of something that can be achieved by people, or that level of understanding can be achieved by people, so they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, and I know I would say, you know, there are. We've been quite lucky, I think, with the adoption rates for both things like solar and electric cars now are such that the word of mouth. The trusted word of mouth is proving, you know, it's probably to be the best marketing channel of all, to be honest with you. So there are actually still people out there that, you know, I was reading a LinkedIn post this morning by someone that had tried an electric car for 6 weeks, and he said, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm handing it back, and here are the 6 reasons why. And some of them were just sort of ludicrous. I mean, you know, he was sort of saying, you know, in winter you get less than 50% of the stated range, which, you know, I mean, I've driven every electric car, and I know that's not true. But you will get this sort of, you know, you will get people making sort of blindly sort of ignorant assumptions or statements that just aren't true, and they're dramatic, which is fine. But actually what you're seeing now is this corrective action where actually you get the people who do have electric cars going, look, that's not true, is it? I know you obviously you had a bad experience, but clearly your electric car with a range of, say, you know, 240 miles clearly didn't just do 100 miles on a charge. That's not right. Maybe you lost 20 or 30% of your range in winter with all the, you know, heating on and lights and everything else, maybe driving aggressively, but you clearly didn't lose like 60% of your range. It's not going to happen. So you get the voices of moderation now, I think, among the kind of the populace creeping in it. So people like me have to spend less time on Twitter and LinkedIn correcting people, because there's now a big group of people out there doing it for me.
And actually, that should work, shouldn't it? Because in my mind, it is about, like with your job, it's about the communication, and like you say, it kind of feels like it's not a fan club. That's not the right word, not the right phrase, but actually people who, like you say, who are driving or utilize, they're driving EVs, they're utilizing, kind of renewable energy or clean energy sources for different, and let them be the spokespeople, because that's the way that other people are going to start listening, isn't it?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
my
And I mean, I
mind.
think we certainly, I think some people still say, well, we're still in early adopter phase. I disagree with that. I think we're past the early adopter, or very early adopters. We're still in we're still being, the phase of adoption is still kind of quite open mindset, let's call it that. We're going to have some time before we get to the laggards, but we have many thousands of people out there now who I would say drive electric cars daily, who drive them just because they're the next car. They don't really care that it's electric. It's just the next logical car for them to buy. It's a bit like people who drove diesel cars. There were lots of people that specifically drove a diesel to save money because they thought they were going to get better fuel economy. Maybe that was true. But it was just because the world sort of, the UK sort of mostly had diesel petrol cars, then it sort of switched, diesel being the majority, then diesel's obviously massively declined. We've got 10% market share of diesel now. So petrol's back in the sort of ascendancy of electric. And I think a lot of people it's just a transitional technology. It's a bit like people who end up with an iPhone who didn't really want an iPhone, but they were just upgrading their phone and it was just the next logical phone to have. And I think that's the stage we're at now. I speak as a 2 EV household, and my wife's just ditched her petrol car for an electric one, and her primary reason, I don't think she'll mind me saying this, her primary reason for having an electric car is actually so she can, she cares about the environment. That's clear. I don't want to get in too much trouble with her, but she definitely cares about the environment, and she is, she doesn't like, she's driven around and she said, I just don't like seeing petrol fumes coming out of the exhaust and think I'm doing that too. But a big reason is preconditioning. She loves the idea. As soon as she found out I could do that on my previous electric car, she couldn't believe that I could remotely heat my car up in the mornings or set it to heat up at 6 a.m.
I didn't know that, so you just told me something.
She was like, all of the stuff that people say about electric cars, don't care. I want to remotely precondition my car. That is so it won't just be about people converting because they want to save the world and they want to save the environment, or they want to save many pounds a year or whatever. People will switch to technology because it's better technology in so many ways. It's there's a motion journalist called Steve Cropley who talks about this a lot, which is the modulation you get through an electric car as well when you're driving it is so much more refined in that when you want to just get a little bit of power out of an electric car, just go very slowly through traffic. That's what you get. If you put your foot down very gently and you just want a little bit of power, you get a little bit of power. In a petrol or diesel car, you can't do that. No. You've got this dirty, great engine running, whether you're crawling through traffic or you can't. It doesn't go down to like a tiny couple of cubic centimeters of petroleum being burned. You're still burning through petrol. You can't modulate it. So it is a better form of driving in my view, and I'm happy. I will argue that all day with people that tell me it's not, but it is a better form of driving. And yes, you don't get exhaust noise, and yes, it's not as visceral. And people who say that EVs have no soul, but it's that changes when you drive them. I don't know many people who drive EVs a lot and genuinely think they're all sort of soulless appliances. That's very much a view of people who've never driven one before.
Yeah,
and once they drive them, they very quickly convert.
Probably people thinking they're driving a toaster or something.
Yeah, and the conversion rates are just insane. I mean, I used to be involved in something in Milton Keynes called the Electric Vehicle Experience Centre, which was all about a multi-brand showroom where people could come in. There was no sales commission, there was no hard sell at all. It was just a learning centre with a few cars you could test drive. And people would come in. No one, I never experienced anyone coming in there, and spoke to the team about this as well. And they never experienced anyone coming in and saying, I really love the idea of an electric car, I'm really keen. Let me drive one. And then they drove one and went, oh, actually, that really wasn't as good as I was expecting. I don't think I want one anymore. That never happened. What happened a lot was people that came in going, I really don't know about this stuff. I think it's going to be boring. I think it's just, and they were clearly being dragged in there by their partner or whatever. And they just thought, I'm just not interested in this. I know it's going to be terrible, but I'll sit in the passenger seat and I'll just fold my arms and frown a bit. And they'd get out and go, that was brilliant. That was so smooth. I can't believe how quick it was, And they would just get their mind blown because they brought all these preconceptions to the test drive, and they were just all blown away. And that's the most common thing that happens, is that people go from sort of skeptic to supporter really, really quickly with electric cars once they drive them. But if you don't drive one, you don't know. So I understand why people are sceptical.
So tell me, so is that still that place in Milton Keynes? Is it still the experience centre? Is it still open?
It's open for a slightly different purpose now. So I think it's about sort of mobility kind of experience now. So you can go there and learn a bit more about sort of mobility experiences. But it was a 5-year project that the government supported in the UK, and it, hundreds of thousands of people came through the doors, thousands of test drives. It definitely helped to boost EV uptake in Milton Keynes, in my view, because people just saw it as a very natural thing to do. And bringing cars as well. Car dealerships get a lot of money spent on them. And they're often made into these sort of palatial structures, but actually they're often out of town. People don't, and a lot of people don't really go car shopping anymore. They do at the very last minute just to kind of check the boot space and stuff, but people don't necessarily go browsing in dealerships as much as they used to. But people go shopping in shopping centres, and actually if you put cars there, that might make more sense. So it's one thing, for example, that Polestar's doing, I think is really interesting, is Polestar with their sort of spaces concept, where they're bringing, they don't have dealerships in the UK as such, they have these spaces where they put 2 or 3 cars in a very high traffic shopping centre, for example, that people will see, and they'll go in and they'll ask questions. And again, they have a very similar model there of, no sales commission, no one's going to shove a contract or an order form in their face. It's just to learn about the cars. And actually, funnily enough, more often than not, the UK CEO was saying the other day, it's more often than not, they actually get questions about the infrastructure and the ecosystem. They don't actually get people going, what trim level is this, or does this come with blue paint or whatever. It's actually, I know all about the Polestar 2. I've done my research online, but can you tell me how I charge it? Can you tell me what's this vehicle to grid stuff coming down the line? Is that going to happen? All that sort of, they're asking more about the industry and the ecosystem than they are about the product now.
So that's really interesting, because I've actually not driven I've not test driven one yet. I've not test driven an EV, so part of this is to kind of take people on my experience of doing this as well, and actually kind of helping others to make that decision, because when I've done it, I want to share it, so at the moment I want, these are the things I want to do. I'm trying to actually find somewhere that will let me, because I'm looking for drive days and things like that, to try and go out and test drive a few, because I have my eye on what I'd quite like, which is an MG4, but I have no frame of reference at the moment, so I want to try a few different cars out, and actually I'm driving a lot more. I always say this, I'm driving a lot more these days, and for me, totally the same as your wife, I don't like the fact that I feel like I'm polluting all the time. And I told you who I'm married to, Professor of Climate Change. It doesn't go down well either. So I think that that's got to be the route that we're going. So I was going to ask you a little bit more about kind of who your actual target market is. How can people, if they're interested in any of the My Energi products, how do they go about finding out more about it?
So we, as My Energi at the moment, we sell effectively through a really great national network of wholesalers and installers. So wholesale kind of electrical businesses, they take our products, installers and buy them from them and install them, or installers might sort of buy them from us as well. So at the moment, the benefit of, I guess, coming to My Energi website is that you would say you want a Zappi, for example, an EV charger. You would get a quote from, say, 3 or 4 companies that would effectively compete for your business through our platform. So rather than going to a manufacturer website and the price is X pounds and that's it, order now, you'll actually be in a system where you get competitive quotes from our installer network. And obviously a lot of those installers also install solar. It's a very common link that solar installers often sell Zappis because they're the best solar charger out there. But so you will, if get a quote for a Zappi, you'll be able to get your quote for solar as well at the same time, and therefore work with that installer to scale the system that you want. And more often than not, they'll probably also have battery technology available to them. Now our Libbi battery product is really just coming to market now, so the first products are arriving soon. We are going to be scaling that up throughout sort of the first quarter of next year, really first half of next year. Demand has been amazing for Libbi. Demand's gone through the roof. You probably saw that at Solar and Storage Live, the sort of queues of people waiting to snap a selfie with it on the stand.
That was me.
Weren't interested to any of our team, they just wanted to get a photograph of the battery. And we're really looking forward to ramping up supply in that period, because it's going to be a very, very high demand product. So the installers that can install that will obviously grow in line with that as well. We're starting to speak to our first installer batch now. So people would effectively buy them through an installer, to get a system fitted. That's a great approach as well, because it obviously means you can kind of knit the technology together rather than buying piecemeal yourself. As I say, some customers have done it before with, say, third-party products and struggled to kind of get the technologies to talk to each other. again, people are doing this in different ways. I mean, some customers are financing their products, some customers are taking out financing to do it. We've done some interesting modelling on things like solar panels that show that, given the cost of electricity now, you might actually be able to finance solar pretty much at break-even point. So what I mean by that is you might be able to finance a solar system where the amount you're saving in your energy bill, at least in some months, is offset. The amount you're paying in the finance is actually offset by the saving in the bill, if that makes sense. So won't work for everyone, but there's a really strong argument for that kind of thing at the moment, where people should really look at the cost, look at how much it might cost you to finance, because you might find yourself very surprised by that. Okay. There are various things out there like home improvement loans. There's green mortgages available now that allow you to invest a certain amount of money in sort of equity release in green technologies. There was a great announcement from Octopus Energy the other day about a deal that they've done with I think Lloyds Bank and Halifax Bank to basically increase the proliferation of heat pumps in the UK, where I think they're saying that they can get the cost down to about £2,000 for their mortgage customers, which again I assume is done through kind of equity financing on the mortgage. So really great options in the market now for sort of financing and bringing these products to more people. But really we're trying to democratise this technology, get it out to as many homes as possible. So we know the current customer typology is more likely to say be an EV driver, or someone who is is slightly better off to afford several £1,000s worth of solar panels.
Yes.
But we really want to make sure this technology gets democratised to as many people as possible as quickly as possible, because that's really how we're going to meet net zero and achieve the energy transition.
I totally agree. We've got to get this out to more people. Like I say, not everybody can afford it. So if we can make it more affordable for people across the UK, it'll make a massive difference, won't it?
Absolutely, and we believe that if you can afford this technology, if you can afford an electric car and you can afford to switch to an electric car, you can afford to get solar panels, you should. It's getting to the point now. We've got less than 1,000 days left to kind of mitigate this 1.5 degree increase in global temperatures. If we want to try and do that within that sort of time frame, it is getting it's getting very urgent. Let's not beat about the bush. It's getting very urgent, and I think there is this moral obligation on people to actually think about, shouldn't I do this? If I can afford to do it, shouldn't I? And it's not just about virtue signaling. It's not just about kind of telling people what to do for kind of social reasons. There's a real economic benefit of it, right? So if more people now who are getting into new cars buy electric cars, and obviously we're kind of at maximum supply anyway, so you can't really have more people buying electric cars. The supply is limited at the moment. But if we can soak up all of that supply coming in and we get more people buying electric cars at the new end of the market, what that does is a really positive effect on the used market, because it basically helps to get used prices down, because obviously you increase supply, you lower price in the used market, you get more availability, more model availability to used car buyers who are on obviously lower budgets, because the used car is cheaper than the new car. So that will drive faster adoption by people with who are less well off, who will hopefully be able to afford these cars in the second-hand market eventually as well. So it's a good thing economically and socially to be investing in this technology as quickly as possible if you have the means to do so.
I do agree, absolutely. So if people want to contact you, if they're interested in obviously what they've just heard, then how can you give your website address and an email address that they can contact you on?
Yeah, so if you go to myenergi.com, and My Energy is spelled with a Y at the end, an I at the end, not a Y at the end, so myenergi.com. We've got obviously the quote form in there if people want to go and find a Zappy, etc., or a quote for anything else, and they're very welcome to track me down on Twitter or LinkedIn. You'll find me very easily if you search Tom Callow, and I'm always happy to engage with potential customers or people that just want to learn more, find out more.
That's brilliant. Tom, thank you ever so much for this. It's been really, really interested, and I'm sure we could probably talk for a lot longer about this, so I probably would give you a shout and get you to come back on again, but I really appreciate it.
I'd love to, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay, and goodbye to everybody else.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon.